The sun bled low over the jagged teeth of the horizon, dyeing the sky in rust and fire as the stagecoach wheels creaked to a halt in the dying dust. Heat shimmered off the street, rising like ghosts from the dirt. Hollow-eyed men leaned and shadowed. Doorways. A dog barked once and vanished behind a chicken coop. One lone figure stepped down from the coach. She moved like a woman who had forgotten how to breathe, her bonnet hiding much of her face, but not the way her shoulders hunched like they expected blows. Her dress was plain, traveling worn, the hem crusted in dust and dried creek water. She carried a single carpet-bag clutched tightly in both hands. She turned her face toward the sheriff's office, lingered on the saloon, then walked straight. Past them all without a glance. Her name, though she hadn't spoken it aloud in days, was Claire. Claire Everett. But she would not write that down. Not again. Not here. The general store bell jingled half-heartedly as she stepped inside. Two men looked up from their coffee and cards. The storekeep barely raised his head from inventory, muttering. A greeting around a toothpick, Claire crossed to the dusty corkboard near the door. Tacked-up notices fluttered in the breeze-lost horses, cattle auctions, a snake oil tonic that claimed to cure heartbreak. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her carpet-bag, smoothed it with shaking fingers, and pinned it to the board. Widow seeking arrangement, discreet, quiet, and capable. Will work for room. Terms negotiable. No inquiries into past. She stepped back and stood staring at the small piece of paper like it might save her from drowning. Then she turned and walked out, the bell jangling behind her. Across the street, from beneath the wide brim of a weather-beaten hat, a man watched her. Samuel Cutter had lived long enough to stop believing in second chances. The world had offered him once a wife with a laugh that made you want to stand still and listen forever. A son who'd gripped his fingers like he could pull the stars from the sky if only he held on tight enough. Fever took both, fever and time. And Samuel had stopped hoping for much after that. He saw the way the woman had posted the notice. Not like someone selling themselves, but like someone clinging to a crumbling ledge. Later that evening, as the town's lamps lit one by one, and the sky turned the color of old bruises, Samuel stood in front of the general store, squinting at the board. He read the words once, then twice. He didn't need a wife, but he needed a solution. The land had come into his hands with stipulations. His uncle's will was clear. He'd inherit the lower pasture and the rights to the silver vein only if he married before the year's end. There was no romance in it, just practicality and law. The woman from the coach seemed as good a solution as any. He found her at the edge of town, sitting stiffly on a bench near the chapel, back straight as a fence post. Her eyes were tired, her gloved hands folded in her lap like she was holding something fragile and dangerous. He didn't bother with introductions. You the one posted the notice? She looked up slowly. I am. I read it. He paused. I've got a proposition. She didn't smile, didn't lean forward, didn't show curiosity. Just nodded once. Go on. I own a spread 30 miles south. Cattle, some mining rights. My uncle left it to me. But to claim all of it, I have to be married. He spoke. Flat, like reading off a list. I don't want a wife in the way people usually mean it. I want an agreement. Quiet. Legal, no expectations. You'll have food, shelter, and work if you want it. In return, I get the land. She studied him. His face was lean, his jaw rough with stubble. He didn't smell of whiskey or desperation. There was weariness there, but not cruelty. His eyes were shadowed, cautious. You won't ask about my past? No, you won't. Require anything of me? Her voice didn't shake, but her hands twitched where they rested. No. He paused. You'll have your own room. your own key. I won't touch you unless you ask." She flinched barely, but he saw it. She stood. "When?" "Tonight. Judge is in town for 2 more days." She nodded once. "Let me collect my things." As she walked away, he noticed she never once asked his name. And he didn't offer it. They were married in the back room of the town hall with only the judge and the cleaning woman for witnesses. No rings, no vows beyond the legal words. She signed her name as Claire Hale. He didn't ask if it was real. That night, he drove her out to the ranch in the fading light. The trail was long and silent. Coyotes howled on the ridge. She didn't ask questions, just stared out the window like she'd left pieces of herself in the dust behind them. The house came into view as a silhouette wood and stone. Long porch, smoke curling from the chimney. It was too large for one man, but perfect for ghosts. He helped her down from the wagon. She held her bag like it was the last thing tethering her to the world. Inside, he showed her to a room at the end of the hall. It had a window, a dresser, a small bed with a faded quilt. "This is yours," he said. "There's coffee in the kitchen come morning." "Water pumps out back." She nodded. "Thank you." He lingered, unsure what to say. Finally, he added, "There's a piano in the sitting room." "I haven't touched it in years." Her eyes flicked up. "I don't play." He nodded and left her alone. The door clicked softly behind him. In his own room, he lit a lamp and pulled out an old photograph from a drawer. The edges were burnt scorched in a fire that took part of the barn 3 years ago. The faces in it were blurred, but he knew them by heart. His wife, his boy, laughing under the cottonwoods. He didn't cry. He hadn't in years. Down the hall, Claire sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. She opened her bag and took out a small tin box. Inside was a letter, warm and folded to the point of tearing, and a child's ribbon yellow, frayed at the edge. She didn't read the letter. She just held it. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old books. Outside, a wind picked up, rattling the porch swing and moaning through the eaves like a warning. 2 people, both running from memories that would not stay buried, had stepped into the same house. Neither knew yet what it would mean, but the first brick had been laid, whether they wanted it or not, and something, perhaps fate, perhaps just the cruel humor of the world, had begun to stir. Morning on the Cutter Ranch arrived not with the cry of roosters or the clang of cowbells, but with silence so deep it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. Claire woke to the golden spill of sunlight through the thin curtains. Her hand curled around the child's ribbon she hadn't meant to sleep with. She sat up slowly, the quiet unfamiliar, disorienting. In her old life, morning meant doors slamming, boots stomping, a voice that barked and never asked. Here, there was only the sound of wind brushing the clapboards, the faint creak of old wood settling into another day. She dressed plainly, moved through the house like a shadow, trying not to disturb anything. The kitchen was large, a little, dusty and full of stillness. A kettle sat cold on the stove. A coffee grinder sat waiting on the counter beside a half-filled tin. She set to work, grateful for something to do, something that didn't ask for thought. By the time Samuel walked in from the barn, brushing straw from his sleeves, the smell of strong black coffee and cornbread filled the air. He paused in the doorway, eyes narrowing, not suspicious, just surprised. He looked at her like she was, a puzzle with half the pieces flipped upside down. "I figured I'd start earning my keep," she said quietly, not meeting his gaze. He nodded once and sat down. She poured him coffee and turned back to the stove, but his voice stopped her. "You don't have to. I know." Neither spoke for a long while. After that, the days unfolded slowly, like a book with long, quiet chapters. Claire learned the Rhythms of the ranch, how the cattle moved in the mornings, how the wind shifted at dusk, how the horses responded better to a whisper than a whip. Samuel was gone most of the day, tending to the land, to the animals, to the business of keeping. Grief at bay through sweat and distance. He didn't ask questions. She didn't offer answers at night. She read by lamplight. There were old novels on the sitting-room shelf, their pages foxed and brittle. Sometimes she sat near the piano, her fingers hovering just above the keys, but never pressing down. Once, in the dark, she whispered a song she remembered her mother singing. The words faltered halfway through. Samuel heard her once and said nothing. She cleaned the rooms. He didn't enter anymore. The nursery, the parlor, the upstairs bedroom with the broken rocking chair. Each held dust like a secret. Each one told her something he hadn't. One afternoon, she found a drawer in the study locked tight. Her curiosity rose uninvited, and she touched the brass handle, gently tried it. It didn't budge. She stepped back, heart pounding not from guilt, but from instinct, from old scars. She hadn't meant to pry. Just understand. He caught her later, standing outside the study, and something flickered across his face. Not anger. Something closer to fear. "I don't go in there much," he said. "Nothing worth seeing." She wanted to apologize, but the words felt like ashes on her tongue. A week passed, then two. They moved around each other like planets in different orbits, never colliding, but always aware of the other's gravity. There were small things that began to shift. He left a fresh bar of soap by the pump. She mended a tear in his work shirt, without saying a word. They started to eat supper together, more often than not. But at night, she still locked her bedroom door. The town was a full day's ride, but every Sunday he made the trip for supplies and mail. One Sunday she asked if she could come. His eyebrows rose slightly, but he agreed. The town square buzzed with life, that morning children chasing each other with sticks, vendors hollering over crates of peaches and beans, the preacher handing out pamphlets with fire in his eyes. Claire walked a half step behind Samuel, chin tucked, eyes scanning everyone. It took less than an hour before she saw him. Not Samuel. Not anyone from the ranch. The man. He leaned against the post outside the barber shop, arms crossed, hat tilted low. His smile was casual, but his eyes were sharp, slicing. A scar rode his jaw like a crooked signature. Her breath left her all at once. Her knees nearly buckled. She turned away, heart pounding so hard she thought it would burst. She kept walking. She didn't tell Samuel. Couldn't. Not yet. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, every nerve electric. She hadn't seen him in over a year, but that smile hadn't changed. He hadn't forgotten. He wouldn't forgive. The next day, she packed her things quietly. Just what she'd brought, nothing more. She wrote a note, but it felt cowardly, so she burned it. She stepped outside under cover of dusk. The horizon glowed faintly, the air cool and thick with the scent of sagebrush. She reached the gate 1 foot already across when his voice came low and calm behind her. "Where are you headed?" She turned. Samuel stood a few paces away, hands at his sides, eyes steady. There was no accusation in his tone, just weary. Understanding. "I have to go," she said, her voice cracking. "It's not safe here." Because of him? She didn't ask how he knew. Maybe he'd seen something in her face. Maybe he'd always known she was hiding a darker shadow than most. "I brought trouble with me," she whispered. "You didn't ask for that." "No," he said. "But I asked you to stay." Her throat tightened. "You don't even know who I am." "I don't need to." "That man, she swallowed. "He killed my brother. Beat me until I could barely walk, then swore he'd find me if I ever talked." Samuel's eyes darkened. the quiet kind of fury that didn't raise its voice. "You talked?" "I did." He nodded once. "Then you've got nothing to be ashamed of." "I'm putting you in danger." "I've lived with danger. What I can't live with is silence." She lowered her bag. Just a few inches. But it was enough. They stood there for a long moment, not touching, not smiling, but breathing the same air again. "I'm not good at this," she said, "being part of someone's life." "I'm not asking for that," he replied. "Just don't. Walk out before you've had the chance to decide." Inside, the fire crackled in the hearth. She looked back at the warm glow pouring from the window, and at the man in front of her. "You really never ask about the past?" He shook his head. "We all carry ghosts. But they only win if we let them." She stepped back through the gate. The gravel crunched beneath her boots. She didn't pick up the bag again. At night, she unlocked her bedroom door and left it that way. Samuel sat in the parlor long after she'd gone to bed, fingers tracing the edges of the burnt photograph. Again, his wife's face, half gone. His boy's smile still visible, even under the scorch marks. He didn't cry, but for the first time in years, he allowed himself to remember without drowning doubt outside. The wind stirred the trees. Somewhere in the dark, an owl hooted a sound that felt like a warning or a promise. The ghosts were still there, in every corner of that house. But for the first time, they weren't the only ones. Something else was beginning to grow in there. Place, not peace. Not yet. But maybe the first fragile roots of it. And the man in the shadows Claire's past, he hadn't left town. But neither had she. The wind shifted that morning. It came down off the ridge, sharp and fast, scattering leaves across the yard and stirring the horses into restless circles. The sky hadn't darkened yet, but something in the air felt wrong, brittle, heavy, like the world was holding its breath. Samuel stood near the fence post, his hand resting on the weathered rail, eyes scanning the tree line. The cattle lowed anxiously in the far pasture, hooves thudding against the ground like distant thunder. Inside the house, Claire was shelling beans. The rhythmic pop and snap calmed her, a small task in a world that didn't often feel manageable. She glanced at the window and froze. A figure stood by the barn. Samuel. She dropped the bowl. The door slammed open as she sprinted to the porch. Her heart pounded as if it had known before her eyes confirmed it. 2 men. One tall and lean, with a rifle slung casually over his shoulder. The other, broader, his face shaded by a wide hat she'd never forget. Her past had arrived. Samuel met her on the porch, rifle already in hand. "Go inside." "I can't." "Claire, inside." His tone brooked no argument, so she obeyed, hands trembling. She crouched near the window, watching as the man she once called husband stepped forward. "Nice place," he drawled. "Didn't think you'd run this far?" Samuel didn't speak. He stood solid as stone, feet planted, eyes cold. "You, the one who married her." The outlaw's grin was all teeth. "She tell you what she did?" "She lie like she breathes. Said I killed her brother. Boy fell on his own damn knife." "She testified under oath," Samuel said flatly. "Ah, the court." The outlaw spat into the dirt. "They don't take kindly to men like me." "But that doesn't mean they win." Samuel cocked his rifle. The sound cracked like lightning. "Take your friend and leave." The outlaw's face changed, still smiling, but the kind of smile wolves wore before they leapt. "You gonna shoot me in front of your sweet little wife?" "If I have to." A flick of motion, one of the men reaching. Claire screamed. Gunfire exploded. Samuel dropped to one knee, fired once, twice. The lean man fell backward with a wet thud. The second round hit the outlaw's shoulder, spinning him around. He cursed violently, but scrambled behind the trough. Claire burst through the door, A pistol in both hands, Samuel's spare from the hallway drawer. "Stay down," he shouted, but she didn't. She moved with purpose, crouching beside him, breath ragged. The barn door swung open. Another shot cracked past her head, splintering the porch rail. "They brought more," she gasped. "They planned this." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Get inside. Lock the door. Go out the back and take the horses. I'm not leaving you. I'm not asking." A window shattered. Claire flinched, ducked behind the post. Another outlaw stepped out from the smokehouse. Aiming with deliberate calm, he fired. The round tore through the porch column, inches from her head. Samuel turned, eyes wide, grabbed her shoulder and shoved her hard to the side, just as the bullet meant for her hit his side. She screamed. He collapsed. The world blurred. She crawled. To him, hands already wet with blood. No, Samuel. His face twisted in pain, but he still tried to sit up. "It's fine. It's not deep. You're bleeding. Keep your head down." They were outnumbered, outgunned, and the sun had slipped behind clouds so thick they swallowed the light. Wind howled through the trees, carrying smoke from the fire someone had started behind the shed. The barn would catch next. The dry brush would carry it straight to the house. She dragged Samuel to cover, propping him against the wall. "I need to stop the bleeding. No time." She pressed fabric against the wound anyway, biting back sobs. "I won't let them take you." "They won't," he said, with a quiet certainty that didn't match the blood soaking through his shirt. Something inside her snapped then. Not fear, not despair. Resolve. She stood, pistol in hand, and ran for the side of the house. 2 outlaws were circling toward the front. She waited until they passed the porch, then fired twice. One went down hard. The other whirled, startled, and she took him in the leg. He screamed, crawled backward, dropped his weapon. She grabbed his rifle, turned, and fired toward the smokehouse. Missed. Fired again. Hit the wall. The outlaw inside swore and ducked down. A sudden, deafening crack. Samuel's rifle again. The man in the smokehouse slumped forward, a neat hole in his chest. The wind whipped harder now, carrying sparks from the barn fire. Flames licked across the roof. Horses screamed inside their stalls. Claire ran to the corral, yanked the gate open. The animals bolted. She opened the chicken coop, the goat pen, anything still alive and trapped. The land was chaos, now fire, smoke, ash, and blood. She ran back to the porch. Samuel was slumped but conscious, his face pale, lips drawn tight. "We have to get you inside," she said, trying to lift him. He groaned. "I'll slow you down." "I don't care." "You're not dying on this porch." She half carried, half dragged him into the kitchen, slammed the door shut, bolted it. Flames glowed outside every window. The barn was gone. The shed collapsed in on itself. The storm had come, and the flood of fire with it. She tore through drawers, found what she needed: needle, thread, whiskey. She looked at him, eyes filled with tears and fury. "I've sewn dresses," she said, voice cracking. "Never flesh." He smiled faintly. First time for everything. The procedure was agony. He cursed once, then bit down on a towel. She worked fast, clumsy, but determined. Every pass of the needle was an act of war against the darkness trying to take him. Outside, the last flames started to die. Rain began to fall, sparse at first, then harder. A late spring storm that came without warning, soaking the scorched land, hissing against hot embers. Nature itself mourning or cleansing, it was hard to tell. They lay on the kitchen floor, breathless. Rain hammered the windows like a heartbeat. "You saved me," he whispered. "You're not allowed to die." She replied, gripping his hand. "Not after all this." He looked at her then, eyes wet and open in a way she'd never seen. You were never just convenient to me. She felt the truth settle between them. Fragile, raw, but real. He reached into his shirt pocket with shaking fingers and pulled out the photograph. She recognized the edges burned, a child's grin in the center. I've held on to this like it was the only piece of me worth keeping, he murmured. But maybe there's more. She took the photo gently, looked at the boy's face. Then back at Samuel. You've carried ghosts, she said softly. So have I, but they don't have to stay. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. She leaned down and kissed his forehead, then pressed her own against his. There was no need for grand declarations. Just breath. Just presence. Just survival. Morning came gray and wet. The fire had burned itself out, leaving scorched earth and silence. Claire sat on the porch steps, rifle across her lap, watching steam rise from the sodden remains of the barn. She was bruised, bone-tired, and forever changed. Behind her, Samuel slept. The bleeding had slowed. The worst had passed. She hadn't run. Not this time. And she wouldn't again. In the distance. The sheriff would be coming. Word would spread. The outlaw was dead. Justice, or something like it, had been served. But that was tomorrow's storm. Today, the flood had receded. The fire had ended. And something new had survived in the ashes. Not peace. Not yet. But the beginning of it. The days after the fire passed in a hush, as though the land itself mourned the violence it had witnessed. The ranch was quiet now, not with the old silence of distance and unsaid things, but with a new, fragile kind of stillness, one shaped by breath, pain, and recovery. The kind that came after the storm, when even the trees seemed unsure whether to reach for the sun again. Samuel healed slowly. His wound ached with every step, but he bore it with the quiet fortitude of a man used to surviving what would break. Others. Claire remained close, not out of duty, not out of obligation to their strange contract, but because she wanted to. The nights she once spent behind a locked door were now passed in a chair beside his bed, dozing lightly, one hand always near his. Her touch steadied him more than medicine ever could. She cleaned what the fire hadn't taken. The barn lay in charred ruin, and the lower pasture was scorched black. But the house had held. The porch had stood. And somehow, so had they. They spoke more now, not in long conversations, but in glances, gestures, the occasional joke shared like a stolen treasure. Once, while trying to patch a tear in Samuel's coat, Claire pricked her finger and muttered a string of curses under her breath. Samuel chuckled a low, rough sound that caught her off guard. When she looked up, his smile faded slowly, but didn't vanish. I hadn't heard that sound in years, she said softly. What sound? You. Laughing. He looked down at his hands. Didn't think I remembered how. She leaned forward. That's the thing about joy. Even when you lose it, it remembers you. One afternoon, weeks after the attack, she asked him about the photograph. You carried it like a lifeline, she said, laying the worn picture on the kitchen table. But you never told me their names. His fingers traced the burn at the edge, careful, reverent. Her name was Helen. Our son was Micah. He wasn't yet 4. Claire waited, quiet, letting the weight of the names fill the space. Fever came through the valley. Took them both before the doctor could get here. I burned the nursery myself. He didn't raise his eyes. Couldn't stand the sound of wind through an empty crib. She touched his hand. I'm sorry. I was too late. Couldn't save them. Couldn't even bury them proper, too frozen that winter. Had to wait until spring. His voice cracked. It changed me. You didn't stop being human, she said. You just stopped believing you were allowed to feel. He nodded. Not in agreement, but in acknowledgement of truth. that hurt to admit. That night, she didn't return to the spare room. She stayed by his side until the lamp burned low, until the air between them was filled not with sorrow, but with something else. A quiet trust, an understanding that neither could name, but both were beginning to recognize Dot in the weeks that followed. They rebuilt. Claire rolled up her sleeves and cleared the wreckage of the barn, hauling lumber, salvaging what she could. Samuel worked beside her when strength allowed. She fixed the windows broken by gunfire. He restored the fence line. When a new foal was born in the south pasture, she named it Grace, and he didn't protest. One evening, she stood in the sitting room, staring at the piano covered by an old sheet. The dust had settled thick, undisturbed for years. Her fingers hovered over the cloth, hesitant. Behind her, Samuel stepped into the room, silent but present. "I never learned," she said without turning. "But my mother used to play." He said nothing, only moved forward and pulled the cloth back himself. The wood was dull but intact. The keys yellowed. She sat down, pressed one note, soft and trembling. "Would you show me something?" she asked. His voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. "I haven't touched it since the day they died. You don't have to." "I want to." He sat beside her. Their shoulders touched. His hand moved over the keys, stiff at first, then more fluid. The melody was simple, broken, half remembered. But it filled the house like light through a cracked door. Claire watched him, not the piano. Every line in his face, every breath, was part of the song. When he finished, she didn't speak. She only leaned her head against his shoulder. Outside, the wind carried the scent of summer wildflowers. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a hawk cried into the sky. That night, she asked him what he would have done if she hadn't returned the night she tried to leave. "I would have let you go," he said after a long silence. "But I'd have kept watching the gate every day after. I think I was waiting for you to stop me. I think I needed you to try." The next morning brought a letter from town. The sheriff had closed the investigation. The men responsible were dead, the danger past. No charges. No further inquiries. Claire held the paper in both hands, her fingers trembling. Samuel watched her. "It's over." "No," she said, tears welling. "But it's finished." She stepped outside and burned the letter in the fire pit, watching the ashes rise. When it was gone, she didn't feel free. She felt something deeper, weightless and heavy, all at once. In the days that followed, they didn't speak much about what would happen next, but choices were made all the same. Claire ordered new seeds from the traveling merchant. Samuel hired 2 ranch hands to help rebuild. She began writing again, short sentences, fragments of memory. He found one of her pages left on the porch. Weighed down with a river stone. It read, "Some wounds don't bleed anymore, but they still ache in the cold. Some don't ache at all, and that's how you know they're healing." She hadn't meant for him to see it, but when she noticed it missing, she didn't ask about it. He built a new barn. She painted the kitchen. The photograph remained in its drawer, but it was no longer hidden. Then came the day she stood at the gate, the same one she nearly ran through once, and turned to him with something like peace in her eyes. "I used to think I was broken beyond repair," she said, "that no one would ever look at me and not see what I'd survived." "I see you," he said, "not what hurt you. Just you." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the child's ribbon, the one she carried like a scar. She tied it to the gatepost and stepped back. "I'm not running anymore." The wind caught the ribbon and lifted it like a flag. He stepped forward, took her face in his hands, and kissed her, not with urgency or desperation, but with gratitude, with awe. Like a man who had finally found something he thought was lost forever. The kiss lingered. When it ended, neither moved. "I love you," he said, voice rough with emotion. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes were wet, her lip trembling. Then, "Let's build something neither of us has to run from." That night, they danced in the sitting room. No music, just quiet steps, laughter, and the sound of their hearts finally beating in time. The piano stood behind them like a witness. The ghosts remained. They always would. But now they had company light, love, and a will to begin again. The storm had passed, and in the stillness it left behind, something new had taken root. Not just healing, not just love, but the return of something much rarer. Hope out if this story moved you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because sometimes what we thought was lost forever is just waiting to be found.